Sure. All right, howdy y'all. We've got Cara here from the Huntington Library, Art Museums, and Botanical Gardens. And she is the head gardener for the teaching gardens here at the Huntington. And she's going to talk a little bit about her progression through the horticulture industry and give us a fabulous tour of the ranch garden. So Cara, if you could introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about how you got into horticulture.
Sure. My name is Cara Hanstein. I've been working in the horticulture industry for now, it's like 20 plus years. And I started out working in a flower and plant store while I was going to college. And then started working in plant nurseries. I then became a gardener, worked for several kind of design, build, and maintain garden companies that kind of did everything in Southern and up in Northern California as well. And I have been at the Huntington for about 9 years now, working in the teaching gardens.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you have a short history for us about how the ranch garden came to fruition?
Yeah, so the ranch garden is now about 12 years old. It started in 2008, but it really started with the introduction of some trees that came from South Central Farms in South Central, which was a community garden that lost its land to development. And so the Annenberg Foundation brought those trees here to the Huntington, and that kind of inspired Jim to create an edible landscape that that incorporated both fruit trees and vegetables and edibles that we could experiment with in Southern California.
All right. Well, on that note, maybe we can get into the ranch and do a little tour of some of these beautiful fruit trees. How would you describe this garden? Like after how many years did you say it's been in the ground?
So about 12 years.
About 12
now.
years.
Yeah.
And as these 12 years have progressed, how has the garden changed, or what do you see this garden as?
Well, I definitely see this garden as like a demonstration or a teaching garden. It was kind of built to inspire people to think of edible and useful plants as something that can be used in the landscape. So maybe rather instead of creating a hedge, you might incorporate fruit trees as a hedge, or
awesome.
I definitely think of it as like a teaching garden. It's always changing. It's definitely a seasonal garden. And so it changes every few months. I always tell people to come on back and check it out because it's very dynamic. It's a very dynamic space. I kind of describe it as like a real integrated garden. Like it's definitely a mix of, fruit trees, vegetables, California and natives and Mediterranean plants. So it's very much like, it's also like a habitat garden because there's such a diverse collection of plants here. It's just loaded with all sorts of birds and little creatures in the garden. So,
oh, that's amazing. We got to get in here.
Yeah, we got to get in. Sorry, I'll stop yakking. But we've got, right now we are kind of, reaching the end of winter, but a lot of our fruit trees are dormant. So the garden definitely looks a little bit more kind of winterized, I guess, right now. But in this first part of the garden, it's we call it the patio garden, and there's a mix of fruit trees. We've got jujubes, pomegranates, mulberries, which are cut back real hard right now, lots of citrus, kind of planted in and amongst a lot of California natives and Mediterraneans. In some gardens you may go in and you'll see big swaths of plantings that are all kind of the same. Here it's really just about mixing things up. So we've got one of this, one of that, and so it's a little bit more of a wild aesthetic, but really the habitat kind of loves having that diversity in nectar and pollen resources. And so
when you talk about habitat, you're talking about the animals and different creatures that are utilizing this garden.
Yeah, that's the one really. I've gardened in different gardens throughout the Huntington, and the one thing that I really notice that's distinctive about this space is the amount of critters and animals running around. And yes, it's probably because it's not open to the public all the time, But I think really, the diversity of planting is a big contributing force to that.
Yeah, I would say you hear a lot more scurrying and chirping in this garden than you do on the North Vista turf lawn. So I think that it's a pretty safe assumption.
And this is one of my favorite plants to show people. It's called Lepicinia, or San Diego pitcher sage. And it's got these little tubular flowers that the hummingbirds just love. But the amazing thing that I wish you all could take part in is the smell of the leaves. It's really almost like a pineapple or fruity, sagey kind of smell.
Oh, we don't have smell-o-vision.
I know, no smell-o-vision.
But I will corroborate your anecdote and say that it is a very, I've heard that it's the best smelling California native plant, so.
Yeah, that's one of the other really amazing things to me about this garden is how many of the sages and California natives just have such a strong, beautiful smell. And I take people sometimes through here and on little scratch and sniff tours and show them the different plants that just have that aroma. They're really aromatic,
So as far, you kind of talked about the habitat that this garden is creating for animals other than humans, but how would you say that the humanities kind of intersect with this garden, and who's the intended audience?
Definitely the intended audience is everybody. We get all sorts of groups that come through here. We get homeowners that come through here, and I think that there's something for everybody here. We have different groups that come in. One of them being young kids in elementary school. So we have with Pasadena School District a program called From Seed to Table, where they come in and see how their food is grown. And so that's, they check out the orchard, they check out the ranch, and they look at the nursery so they can see different ways in which food is grown, kind of might be more similar to like a commercial orchard in the orchard, and then in greenhouses in kind of a controlled environment, and then here kind of in this wild interplanted garden.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, and then we also get college students that come in. We have a teacher who brings her anthropology of food class in every year. We get soil science students. So yeah, I think the audience is really broad.
That's awesome. And do you plan in the future to be teaching out of this space or doing more tours once we can be in person again?
Yeah, definitely. I've given a few virtual tours of the garden using PowerPoint or Zoom, but I think doing more stuff in person would be great. I also think a lot of hands-on gardening kind of classes would be really helpful for people. Maybe they learn about composting or veggie gardening. So that's something that I really hope for the future of this garden is to kind of have down and dirty classes.
That's
too.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's take a look around. As we're walking, how many people does it take to maintain this garden? It seems pretty large.
Yeah, so this garden is about 1.5 acres, and we have one full-time gardener who's here all the time, and then myself comes in throughout the week, along with also we have volunteers. I think right now we have a smaller volunteer force, but we've got 3 volunteers, and then we also have an internship program where we have different college students come in, and they usually are here for a stint of 4 to 6 months working at the ranch, and then also in the potager garden.
Great. And so after their internship, are you then somebody who would be writing letters of recommendation?
Yeah,
for
I've definitely done that, and it's I think that the resume building opportunity for people is really great, and also the hands-on experience of just being in a garden, and then it helps people figure out how where in the field they might want to maneuver or go into. Some people love the physical labor, some people are like, maybe I'm more into design and planning.
Sure.
And so it's kind of fun to see where it leads people.
Yeah, where the students end up in the end, right?
Yeah, that's always fun. So then over here, I mentioned that this garden was kind of designed and intended to inspire the homeowner. Everything in this garden is kind of using materials that someone might be able to easily access themselves. So it might be less grand kind of than the Chinese garden, but it's kind of like down home materials, rocks, gravel, the broken concrete pieces that bed over there with the irises is made out of is a keyhole garden.
Oh,
and in the middle we've got a lawn substitute, Achillea millefolium, used kind of
yeah, let's take a look at that.
Yeah,
that's
it's
pretty
like
cool.
a no-mow.
So I see that you guys are putting together a garden that like I literally could put together at home with maybe reusing some of the materials I have on my property. That's awesome.
Yeah, so you can see this is a material you can buy this at like the I call it the rock store. I don't know what where they've got building materials store. And it's, you know, they'll bring it over for you and it's fairly inexpensive, and you're recycling, you know, concrete pieces that maybe just otherwise thrown, you know, in a landfill somewhere. So
that's amazing.
The garden is definitely using techniques that inspire, you know, sustainability or you know, kind of restorative practices.
Right, I really love that. And is this something that you helped build, or? I
did not. It was actually here when I started gardening up here. We did change the planting in it.
It's beautiful. So this is the lawn substitute that you were talking about, the Achillea?
So that's the Achillea. So it kind of, it goes through various stages of beauty, I guess, throughout the year, but it always kind of consistently is green, at least, but it gets lots of little white flowers that benefit, you know, bees and butterflies. And so, you know, creating like a little meadow rather than having a turf area might be a good option for a lot of people.
I just have a curious question to ask. I noticed that you had said that the mulberries you guys cut back really hard. And why don't you give a little explanation as to kind of their growth habit and why they get cut back
so the mulberries are great. They fruit beautifully in May. But we had 3 of them in the middle of this garden in this first section, which is probably no more than, not quite an acre even. And so it was kind of a lot for the space. It was shading out a lot of things, but also they get so massive and dense. And this particular garden, it's all about like your own microclimate, right? And discovering what that is. This particular garden is like a wind tunnel. And so we actually lost one large mulberry that was right here this last year because it had gotten so dense. It had been 2 years since we pruned it at all. So it got so dense that it just got caught by the wind and fell right over.
Oh wow.
I'm sure that there's a, you know, a lot more to it than that, but I'm sure like the watering that happens around the tree probably played a part in it as well. But the density of those trees is just a bit massive. So we took them down real hard and did what we call like pollarding them this year. And then I'm not sure that we'll get fruit this year, to be honest, but we will have scaled back our trees.
So this is something that you might do once every few years, not a pruning practice for every year.
I think you can do it every year.
Oh, okay,
Some people will take it down to the knuckles where they had pruned it the previous year. I think that's actually more ideal sometimes with pollarding, because sometimes if you're not regular about it, you get this long kind of spindly growth that happens. But anyway, we skipped a couple of years, and so we got into trouble.
Okay, so you cut them back hard this year. Oh, well, that's awesome. It sounds like you know a lot about pruning practices. Is that one of the joys of your job?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do. Definitely in this garden, there's a lot of trees, so there's a lot of fruit tree pruning that we do during the winter. And that's the great thing about taking care of a space for a long period of time, is that you can watch how it responds to what you've done and learn for the next time. So really that's been something that I've appreciated about being in this space, is getting to nurture it along and see how the pruning works one year, and then maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so you can see right behind you we pruned back our figs.
In the same manner
as well. And that was, the figs were just getting so tall that we couldn't harvest them. It was just enough for the birds. So we wanted to kind of scale back the fig trees to where we could harvest them. Greta and I, who work here, are both short, so
Yeah, and it
we
makes
joke
sense.
that we took the trees back maybe a little to our manageability, but
And I remember you teaching one year, you taught us pruning methodologies, and you talked a little bit about the method of pruning backyard style, where you keep the trees
oh yeah, well, that's
shorter.
where the intention, yeah, is to keep the trees to where you can manage them and they're a size you can work with. So yeah, we tend to prune a lot of the trees here in that kind of backyard style, really to keep them small in stature.
Very cool.
I say that as I stand right next to a huge jujube. We can't reach the jujubes on that anymore.
Oh yeah, that guy is big, isn't it?
This is kind of fun just to show off the gardening shed in the
Yeah.
garden.
I think we're all into tools if we're into gardening, right?
Yeah. So this is the tool booth, and this is actually a replica of one of the oldest buildings on the property here at the Huntington Ranch. Which is why we call this the ranch, is because Huntington originally called his property the ranch.
How
when
cool.
he was speaking of it. So
What
it's
was
kind
the-
of a homage to that his history.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, this is the gardening shed. You can see.
And what was the original, was it an original tool shed on the property? Is
Yeah,
that, oh,
exactly.
how cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's just take a look. Oh, wow, look at these organized tools. You're amazing, Cara. This is
Greta's amazing.
pretty amazing.
Greta's been keeping this one
Oh, wow, look at all
in
that.
order.
Oh, this is wonderful.
It's funny, the wasps, the paper wasps, love this space, and so we always find nests in here, so we have to
Really?
keep the windows closed.
Oh. So this can be kind of a test garden in some ways for a bunch of different climate appropriate perennials. And
Yes, that's definitely, another intention of this garden is to test out what stuff does, the best in Southern California and Los Angeles. So we have a lot of success with things like pomegranates and figs, and then some of the low chill variety stone fruits, like we've got Eva's Pride peach and May Pride peach, and we've also got lots of plums as well, and those things all do well here. One of the things we haven't had that much success with is I planted a cherry tree,
oh.
but I don't think we quite get cold. It's supposed to be a low chill, like a 500 hour.
Yeah, I know sometimes we don't hit that mark,
And
do
we
we?
just haven't hit it yet. So
Ah.
the tree has been growing a lot. We pruned it back hard again, but it's not produced any cherries.
Does it
yet.
flower? I'm just curious.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it flower.
no.
Okay.
And so, so definitely a test garden for what does well in our climate. And like I said earlier, it's all like a microclimate. You have to figure out even though, yes, we're in Los Angeles, this garden is unique, compared to maybe another garden in Pasadena.
Right.
This garden, because there's like a nice hill right here, stays very cold. There have been plenty of mornings when I come in and there's, ice in the wheelbarrows.
Wow.
It also gets really hot and almost unbearable to work in during the summer. So we do get the extremes, which is why I've wondered maybe why the stone fruits do really well. A stone fruit I didn't talk about are the apricots. Apricots are probably the favorite crop here.
Yes.
We have 3 different varieties, and they do really well. We're waiting and waiting, and then 2 weeks in June, we're in apricot heaven, and then they're done. They're gone. So it's a real short period of time, but it's really fun.
Well, I can attest to the personal benefit of your harvesting here at the ranch.
Yeah, we share the harvest with staff and volunteers here, and
What type of enclosure is this? This is really cool. Is this another keyhole garden? Or?
yeah. So this we built with high school volunteers actually who work
Oh
in
my
the garden.
goodness.
And we kind of dug a giant hole in the middle, just because we thought we needed like more little kind of gathering spaces.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And so we just kind of sunk down and put a picnic table in the middle here. And they built these little rock walls, which have been they've been here for about 3 years now, so they've been pretty durable.
Wow, this is beautiful. And is the intention that a tree will like shade this area?
Yeah, so that's why we planted the cherry tree right here.
Oh, okay.
That big.
Well,
'Cause we
eventually
knew
it
it'd get
will.
big
Yeah.
and shade this area.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is so cool.
So that's kind of, and then yeah, right here in front of you, there's some espaliered pomegranates.
Those are
So
beautiful.
none of us have grown those before, so we're seeing how they espalier, which is just growing them flat.
Well, as they leaf back out, they look spectacular. That's just so stylistic.
Yeah, it's fun. And they
Very
it
beautiful.
does take a lot of pruning, especially because pomegranates like to sucker a lot,
Mm-hmm.
produce suckers. So, but it's worth it because they're pretty handsome little trees.
Yeah, and they're somewhat drought tolerant, right? Aren't they
They're
super heat and drought
they're
tolerant?
super drought tolerant.
And you
which
still
is
get
great.
fruit.
That's great because this garden, a lot of it is manually irrigated.
Oh, okay.
Meaning we just turn on a hose, attach it to some drip line, or set up an oscillator sprinkler head. So a lot of it is done by hand. I'd say half the garden is done by our solar powered technology. Right here behind you is the timer.
Oh,
And you
cool.
can see it just has a little solar panel on the top, but it's enough of a surge, it gives enough of a surge to start the valves. And so we have 8 valves that water from this timer.
Well, you've got plenty of sunshine out here, so you have the
Yeah.
power source. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
So you're doing all of this without electricity?
We're doing all this without electricity.
Wow. Oh, so this is true homesteading here.
Yeah, really. Let me show you the vegetable garden.
Oh, yeah, of course. Ooh, blueberry.
So once you get to kind of the heart of the garden, the middle, we have a traditional row garden situation where we have different vegetables planted out in rows. And it's enclosed by this little fence here that we have to keep the rabbits out. So it's about like 3 feet so they can't jump over.
Does it work?
It does work.
Nice.
The only times we have found rabbits in the garden is when the gates have been left open.
Oh, human error.
Human error, yeah. So, but right now we've got our cool season crops in. So that's, you probably all know this, but it's just things like different kales and mustards and snow peas, carrots. And we kind of experimented with doing an integrated planting where we would have things all mixed up rather than doing distinctive rows this time.
What was the thought process behind that?
We were trying to see if we'd have less pest pressure because there's lots of books out on companion planting and a lot of it is kind of like aromatics or, what's that word? Sorry. Exudates that are put out by the roots that kind of might deter a pest. And so we definitely did have less pest pressure, it seems.
So
but it's hard for me to get over wanting to have
those beautiful rows
the
of
beautiful rows of it. Like, I don't know.
the visual
I have,
impact.
In my mind, like vegetables should have geometry.
Right.
So it was kind of like,
I love that.
It was hard for me to get wild with it.
Right.
But it was a fun.
I love that.
try.
I love how diverse you are here and that you're able to do a lot of experimentation.
We definitely have a lot of freedom up here, which is really nice to try different things.
Yeah, that really is. Is there are there any new projects that you're working on? I know you have some composting going on with.
Yeah.
If you'd like to talk a little bit about that program.
That would be really fun to talk about. Yeah. So we've started working with an organization that brings food waste that they collect from people's homes. It's called Compost Culture, and they bring sometimes up to like 1,000 pounds of food waste every week, and we mix it. So that's like the high nitrogen, right? The green of the compost, and then we here at the Huntington supply the brown matter or the carbon. So we use our mulch that we make and mix it with the green waste and then create, you know, compost. So I can show you the piles.
Oh yeah,
we'll get over there.
Heck yeah, we want to see that. Is there any like favorite plant besides the lepichinia in this garden? That, I mean, you've got so many, it's hard. I know it's hard to pinpoint, even if it's not in this garden. What is kind of,
you know, I do have, I'll tell you, like, it's not my favorite plant, but it's been a plant that like I've been kind of intrigued by in this garden, and it's right over here, and it's called Oenothera elata.
Oh yes.
And so
I think I ask you almost every year, what is that again?
Yeah, so it's this plant here, which looks nice and innocent, but it will get probably like 10 feet tall with these really beautiful, you know, like primrose kind of yellow flowers. And the thing that I love about it is we planted 2 of them, and they're now all over the garden. So it's very,
it gets around.
It gets around. I was gonna say this plant gets around, and but it's a host plant for the white-lined sphinx moth.
Ooh.
So, which is a really beautiful moth that sometimes is called the hummingbird moth, because it's really large, and you can see it during the daytime. Usually, you can recognize them. Oh, I thought I just saw one. It was a hummingbird though. But they fly really erratically, like kind of crazy, and you'll see them early in the morning on different nectar sources, but this is their host plant. It's also their caterpillars are the tomato hornworm.
Oh.
So people freak out when they see them in their garden, not knowing that they turn into this really beautiful California native moth. But we had tons of tomatoes in the garden last year, and they didn't touch the tomatoes, but we had caterpillars all over the Oenothera, I'll call, you know, the primrose, the tall primrose.
Oh, that's awesome. So if you give them a source of what they need.
Yeah, so I wonder if, you know, they got what they need, then they're not gonna.
Yeah, that's companion planting.
Your other, you know, your other plants. So,
that's so awesome.
So that's been one of my favorite like discoveries in this garden.
Side. And so you say that all of this came from just 2 plants being planted?
Yes.
So are these seed?
They reseed. They self-sow really easily. Yeah.
Very cool.
And so if someone who is like really interested in creating a habitat garden might consider some of these plants, and they don't mind like a wilder aesthetic, might consider some of these plants that other people might think of as noxious or weedy, but they, you know, will self-sow all over the garden, and the butterflies love them. Another one that's great for that is Verbena bonariensis.
Oh yeah.
The butterflies love it, and it self-sows all over the place. I mean, there's one right here. It's pretty small and hard to see, you know, what it will be like right now, but they get tall purple flowers, and they'll be covered with the Gulf fritillary and other butterflies.
Yeah, I really love the concept behind this garden, because it's like you have plants that are very productive for the ecosystem that surrounds the garden and habitat, and then also plants that are productive for us humans. That it's just such a cool dual approach. I really admire that.
I think it's definitely like, if you definitely think of it as like an ecological kind of, and thinking of humans as a part of nature too, and not just, oh, this is for the butterflies and for the insects, and then this is for me, and keeping, you know, it's all kind of integrated, and so kind of, we're all part of that ecology. Yeah, and
I really appreciate how you're changing the aesthetic. I liked your comment about liking the symmetry, or feeling used to the symmetry of vegetables, and I think that that's how a lot of people feel about their own home landscapes in a way, and I see a lot of that changing to this more, like you said, wild aesthetic that is just more naturalized and super beautiful.
Yeah. I think definitely if we kind of work to, like you said, changing our aesthetic is like an important thing. I think if we're going to shift more towards gardens that are, you know, more native or more climate appropriate, you know, because we need to kind of appreciate some of those sage greens and, grays rather than the neon green of a
Yeah.
lawn, or you know, of a boxwood hedge.
I hear you.
And kind of.
Yeah, I'm always trying to convince people that brown is a color of beauty in nature. And
Yeah.
oh, that's dead.
Yeah, the rusts that we
The
get in the
very-
California landscapes are really beautiful. I don't know. Right here, there's a California native garden.
Yeah, let's take a look.
So this section used to have a large oak in the middle of it, and it had you know, started to decline, so it came out, and so this garden has kind of shifted to more of a full sun California native landscape. So we just planted like a mesquite tree in the middle.
Ooh.
And it's surrounded by lots of other flowering California natives. Yeah. And then
Very cool.
yeah, so this one right here, which has gotten kind of almost invasive too, is a mugwort, Artemisia douglassiana. And so that's one that has some like cultural significance for people, and is used in different sorry lost my train of thought.
Like medicinally, or?
Actually, people smoke it.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh, cool.
I just realized that I don't know enough about that to really speak to it, so maybe
Well, I took a shot of the sign, so
Okay.
people, you know, we're in the age of information now, so
Yeah,
people can do their due diligence, do their
Yeah.
homework after this segment.
yeah, maybe we should go around and take a look at the compost.
I think we should, yeah,
Okay.
thank you. And so the company that brings the compost, I know you had said before it was like a couple of high schoolers?
Yeah, so it's the company is called Compost Culture, and it's run by 2 high schoolers and various high school volunteers.
Oh, cool.
And they go around to people's homes and collect their food waste.
Wow.
And they also go to food banks that have a lot of excess food, and they collect it and bring it back
Wow.
here, and then we make the compost with it. So,
And-
oh, this is a good shot of the vegetable garden in here. This is a good angle,
Ooh.
probably.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And do they take some of the compost with them to?
You know, they take a little bit every month to.
Oh.
They also have representation at a farmer's market.
Nice.
So they will give back some of the compost to the community, but it's really a small amount. Kind of the benefit for us is that we get to actually keep and use the compost here in the gardens.
That's amazing.
Yeah. These are some raised beds here where historically we've always kind of done some experiments. Alicia has been kind of managing this space for a couple years, trying out different things, maybe putting different fertilizers against each other and different soil situations. So right now we've just been trying to plant them out as much as we can. I think previous to this we had some cover crops planted, different cover crops. We wanted
That
to
was
see
fun
which
to
ones,
see.
yeah, which ones are more successful, or how successful they are. Not necessarily more
Right.
successful than the other, but maybe different growth habits. Kind of getting to know your cover crop, you know.
Man, these come back every year, huh?
Yeah, the calendula.
That's standard.
I think you planted those narcissus, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple little bulbs coming up. Well, that's good to know that
Mhm.
they're successful.
Oh, over here is the shade structure.
Oh yeah,
Where in previous years for these Master Gardener classes, the Master Gardeners have come here and had some demonstrations or talks in this space. And the Master Gardener program actually has worked with the ranch in teaching the public about gardening. And they've utilized this space for their workshops or just their kind of meet and greets with the public, where they've got books out and information for people, and they kind of will also have samples from the garden for people to taste.
Do you see any of that coming back in the future?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm not sure what it will look like if we'll do the food sale. You know, it's
Right,
hard to
yeah.
predict what the
It's hard
future
to
will
know.
be like, but yeah, definitely. I think that you know, using this space for teaching opportunities is a really important part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can just by this tour, it really is important in some ways to have context for this garden and other garden spaces here. We've been doing kind of a series of tours, and those are the comments that I get the most, is that it's nice to have a professional representative kind of teach you about the garden so that you know what you're looking at and you know what parts are important and some of the focuses.
And that's been kind of the goal or job of the master gardeners, is to show them around the garden, show people what is possible, and also people come to them with their home gardening questions, and so they will you know, provide information and help.
Very cool. Well, why don't we take a look at those compost piles? I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions. One is there any piece of advice that you would give students or people that are new to horticulture or new to this field?
I think that people are drawn to this field by love of plants, love of gardening, and so I think that's, I don't need to give advice in that in that area, but maybe just you know, just get in there and don't be afraid to try different things. I've done a lot of different kinds of jobs within horticulture. I've done gardening, I've worked in nurseries, I've worked in landscape architecture, so any, you know, I would say just trying new things, and
like get a broad range of experiences.
Don't feel like you have to necessarily do one type of thing to get to where you want to go.
That's great advice.
I don't know if that's
no, I mean that's exactly kind of the progression that I took too, and I think it's a really great space to come from.
Yeah, I kind of like that I started in nurseries and in plant stores, because I got to know the plants, and then when I started gardening, I was like, oh my gosh, that plant gets this big, and I was like so amazed. Had no idea. It's just like, oh my gosh, and that was like a whole other experience, like learning like the mature growth of plants and how they interact or what they, you know, look like. And yeah, I don't know, it's the greatest thing about this field is that you never stop learning. And so I think that yeah, just keeping that in mind, that it's definitely like that's what you'll be doing, is learning constantly, so you can't feel this pressure to like know everything.
Right. Yeah, in fact, isn't that some of the excitement and wonderstruck of horticulture, is that you'll never know everything.
Yeah, there's a dip right here.
Okay, thank you. Oh, so this is it.
Yeah, so we actually had several piles going.
Oh my goodness, it's so cool.
Edward and Greta built these raised
They're
what do you
geniuses.
call them? They're bins, right? Yeah. And,
oh my gosh, they did a great job.
They did a great job. And so we had tons of piles. It was almost too much.
Yeah.
And so they took 3 of the piles and put them in here. And so you can see these are like kind of the compost piles that are no longer in need of being turned.
Okay.
That are kind of just curing here.
I see.
And so they'll cure here for like 6 months, you know.
Oh,
but these come off. And then this last one here we just made, and we did a layering kind of lasagna, you know, strategy with the green and the brown back and forth. I have great pictures of when we took off this. You could see it was like a piece of lasagna.
Oh, how awesome.
So this is a new one. And so this we'll have to take these off, and we've been turning it and then putting it back in.
What a great system.
Yeah.
And how long about does it take for those food scraps mixed with your brown waste to break down into compost?
That's a great question. I'll show you a pile that's probably about 5 weeks old.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and thank you for doing this, Cara. This is very educational. Oh, wow.
So I'll tell you, when this pile was, so this pile's like 5 to 6 weeks old. That's been like the most impressive thing for me is to learn how fast our food waste does break down. Because we get a pile made and there's chunks of tomatoes and avocados and all these things where you can identify them, and then weeks later you can't tell what's what. It just looks like chunky
amazing.
soil. So,
and by putting this, do you like lay it on top of your landscapes? Do you blend it into your existing soil?
So there's definitely like different, yeah, historically I've always kind of mixed compost in, but lately I've been learning about just like how that's not necessary.
Right.
And so people are doing a lot of no-till gardening where they just layer things on top. And so the last few times I've applied compost, I've just laid it on top. And it's so much less work, and it almost makes you feel guilty, like you're not doing something right. Especially with this training of like,
I totally hear you.
The soil, like, what? I'm not breaking my back enough. This is too easy. It's got to be wrong.
But it's nature, yeah.
But it's duplicating, it's mimicking nature, and like, it's funny because I noticed way less weeds when I did it that way.
Wow.
And a lot more worms. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many more worms. I'm not having weed issues. Whereas in the past, when I've used a fork to kind of mix the soil up with the compost, you're just bringing seeds up to the surface and activating them. And then it's just amazing with this no-till, just layering approach, how much less weed pressure you have.
Well, this is really wonderful, Cara. I'm gonna wrap it up and say thank you for this wonderful tour, and I think that you've given all of the students and master gardeners a lot to think about.
I'm happy.
Yeah, as far as just kind of doing things, taking a different approach than maybe what is in our mind. I'm glad that the zeitgeist is changing a bit, and we're starting to see these natural systems incorporated into contrived landscapes, because you can, if we're quiet enough, you can hear the benefit, and really see the hard work that you guys are putting into the ranch is really paying off. This is a beautiful space, and we thank you for your time, Cara.
Bye-bye.